Welcome to Dear Diaspora, a podcast celebrating the African diaspora and the changemakers, innovators, and entrepreneurs working to make our world a better one to live in. I'm your host, Kowa. Let's get started. I cannot wait for y'all to listen to the amazing conversation I had with our next guest. She is the host of Diaspora Talks, another really cool podcast y'all should check out. She's the founder of the Take Back Africa Foundation, and she's currently studying to get her master's from George Washington University. We had such a great conversation about immigration and our experiences growing up here in the United States as African immigrants, and I learned so much from this conversation and can't wait for y'all to hear what Fata had to share. So here's my conversation with Fata Acquoi. Fata, thank you again for sitting down with Dear Diaspora. I'm super excited to chat with you just about the really cool stuff that you have going on. I listened to your podcast and I absolutely love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like it just like speaks to me, and I've been like searching for content that's like actually relatable.
Yeah,
So
definitely understand.
yeah, so that's like the hardest thing. So when I came across your podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like finally someone is talking about like things that, you know, I'm interested in, the diaspora and being engaged in African development and all those things. So
Thank you.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, I wanted to start with just getting to know more about your experience as like a Liberian living in the U.S. Like how long have you lived in the U.S. and just, you know, what's it been like?
I mean, I don't want to categorize everybody's story as the same because everybody has their unique journey at different stages. I, for one, I'm unique because I came at a younger age than some of my counterparts who, you know, come from high school. So the level of development that they've had on the continent is a little bit longer than me. But we migrated to the U.S. in 2003 during the final stages of the second half of the Liberian Civil War. And so my mother was actually already here in the U.S. Studying to get her BSN in nursing in Minnesota. And so when the second half of the Civil War broke out again, she was like, you know what, I need to send for my kids, get my family out of there. And so she worked hard, like every immigrant story. Struggling to, you know, save up money to be able to get lawyers to send for her kids. She was on Deferred Enforced Departure, which is a temporary status. It's not really a status. It's just a temporary holding within the U.S. That was granted by a couple of presidential administrations. But being able to do that and being able to work multiple jobs and sleep on somebody's floor to be able to send for your kids. So I like to relate it to the American dream. Liberia, a lot of people don't know about our history and our ties to the United States, which is very crucial for why a lot of us look to the U.S. for help, or why we are very much pro-America in a lot of things that we do. Just the fact that free slaves were sent back to Liberia to form their own land, to form their own nation, but there were already indigenous people there. So that created some tension between the different factions of what it means to be Black and being Black and coming from a colonial heritage, right? And then coming back to people who are still indigenous. And so those problems still plague Liberia to this day. And that's a problem that plagues even us within the diaspora. You know, when we come here, trying to figure out whether or not where to fit in, you know, as one of the things I always talk about is Black immigrants. We're very unique because we fit in, you know, if we don't say anything, you could just be, somebody's like, oh, she's Black. You won't really have to have that extra, you know, eye on you. You can blend in and kind of hide under the Blackness without having to really show your immigrant status. And then you have that additional layer of being Black and an immigrant, which really gets looked over. And so there's a lot of issues that plague the Black immigrant community that really doesn't get talked about. And so A lot of us who are Africans who came here at a young age struggle with being called African booty scratcher, the bullying, the trying to figure out if you're Black enough or you're African enough, and how to balance both roots. I think a lot of Liberians that I've looked or I've had conversations with have had the same struggle internally, who come at a younger age, because you are seeing the best of both worlds. You saw what it was to grow up on the continent, but then you also seeing what it means like to actually grow up in the diaspora and the differences, and then being that translator for your parents and kind of trying to, that you're the bridge in between to try to bridge both communities together. And so it's an internal struggle, what it means to be, Black or Black and African within the U.S. And as a Liberian, I struggle with that. I didn't claim my culture for a long time because Liberia, we spoke English, so I can blend in. I can finesse, speak my series, my Kowa-Chongo, and just and hide that and fit in. And so I was able to do that until I think it was like in middle school when I met another Liberian, and she was so unapologetically African. I was just like, you know what? It was something to see at a young age, and I am so grateful to her to this day. Diamond, I always give her a shout out, but like she was just herself, and so it forced me to be like, it's okay if I want to eat African food and bring it to school, or if it's okay if I want to listen to Liberian music or talk about Liberian culture with somebody who is able to relate, because nobody else around me was able to relate. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was a struggle, but we're here now.
Yeah, and what a gift to run into someone like that so early on. Middle school, I feel like, is just one of those times where you're really like, trying to figure out who you are and like your identity and things like that. So to be able to, have an example of someone that's like super proud of their culture is, makes a huge difference. So
no, you're right.
Yeah, I totally relate to a lot of what you said about, I came here when I was in the 6th grade, and I was the only African in my class, one of like not even 5 Black students in my entire the 2 6th grade classes. And so it was very hard for me to kind of figure out where I could fit in. People didn't understand, where I was from, and being 10 years old, it's hard to really like articulate like, okay, I'm Black, but I am different from you. This is where I'm from. So totally am able to relate to what you have to say. So, and I also love that you brought up the fact that, people don't really think about the experiences of, Black immigrants and things like that. And so one of my questions was, why do you think that America paints immigration as just like a brown issue? Is it something that they are just like overlooking, or are they thinking like, okay, yes, they're immigrants that are not only just, brown, like, or do you think that they are just completely ignorant of the fact that there are people that are Black and immigrants?
America's not ignorant of the fact. I mean, I'm a student of political science and international affairs, and I, hone in on countries and how we, interact with each other. And one of the things that America is 100% set on and knows for sure is that immigration is great for their economy. Regardless of how you feel about other races, immigration is good. Now, the tension that happens between, bringing the Black narrative into immigration, what I've noticed is struggles from, the idea of slavery, right? That America still has not come to terms with the fact that that's historically something that they did and they engaged in. We can't even still have a conversation about slavery. Like literally, it's not even something in textbooks in some states because they don't want to have those conversations. But that's the core of what built this nation. And so, but that was the slavery on the backs of, yes, American Indians, but the slavery, the work and the roots was on the backs of Black people, Africans. Yes. For a long time, and their descendants. And so now you get to a point where you're just like, okay, do we count, first America's thinking, do we even count these Black stars as immigrants? Well, they didn't come here willfully. So you can't even count those people as immigrants. And then you have a plight where in the 90s, America started getting involved in a lot of African politics. And so a lot of the nations, for example, like Liberia, during America was very aware of what was happening in Liberia from the get-go. Our constitution, our everything is based off of the United States, and we rely heavily on the United States for foreign aid, etc. And they knew who's in the presidency, who was going to take over, who was going to do the coup. They were aware of all those things, and they sponsored it or supported it. So the backlash of that is immigration. Those countries, those people are going to have to migrate somewhere when things are unstable. People are always looking for peace and security, no matter what. And so the issue right now is those stories, or the stories of Black immigrants, it's not something that's really, in the 90s, it was something that was really talked about, but it became something that just faded out. Once in a while, you'll have one of us, a Black student, come into a community or school, but we usually stay in the same communities. Like, I can name where the Liberian communities are in the US. You can name where, your communities are. I can name where the Nigerian communities are in the US, Dallas. You know what I mean? In certain places, that's where we all flock to, and we like to create community. Same thing. The issue with what's happening with what is being painted as brown, it was not the first time. You've seen this during World War II when it was Japanese immigrants who were being, put in concentration camps and told that Japanese people were not good people and they need to go back to their land, and being called all these aggressive names. And now you see the same thing with Mexico. The issue is that now that Spanish and America sees the population changing, now that they see that the people who are basically having a higher birth rate are people of Hispanic descent who are having kids. And so that's what they're scared of. They see what's changing, and that is going to shake up what is actually going to be the nation moving forward. That's a scary conversation nobody wants to have. And so when we the issue for advocates like myself is like, if I'm advocating for a deferred enforced departure, a lot of my work was based on a national campaign to extend the temporary status of Liberians, right? And so I'm over here advocating, and Liberia, who was established by basically the American Free Slave Society, I have to explain to congressmen and women where Liberia is and what is its relation to the US.
Which is wild.
Which is, you would think you're just sitting there like, you have to be kidding me. I literally was so shocked. And I'm just like, wow, we thought we were coming in to be like, okay, this is what Liberia is, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's move forward. It was like, no, we had to do a history lesson. We had to talk about the importance of Liberia, what Liberian immigrants would bring to the US economy, all these different things. You have to have data to prove that. And so it's like, our communities are scared, and our communities are good at hiding. And we can blend in, like I said earlier, behind Blackness. We can be able to really blend in. But now for Liberians, for example, it's scary because ICE is deporting us. They're catching us and at the same rates. But that's the thing. People don't want to talk about it because people feel like if you shine light on it within our communities, then you're going to have that conversation where people feel like you're exposing them to danger. Man. So it's a very complicated space to be in.
Totally. Because I feel like even when DACA was like when Trump first started to, propose like repealing it and things like that, like I feel like the most people that you heard from were people from like the Latinx community. And I know DACA isn't just for people in the Latinx community. So I feel like that's when I first started to like kind of do my research and figure out like, okay, like who else is being impacted by this? So like for you, how did you kind of get into advocacy? Was it just like local organizations that were working on this that you were a part of, or like what kind of inspired you to like become like an advocate?
Man, I've been a fighter all my life. For me, I've started way back, I would say in probably beginning of my high school days. I joined the student council, the National Honor Society, student government, ran for class vice president, things to be able to advocate for basically my constituents or people who are just like me, my peers, right? And from there, I got involved in, political organizing. I got involved, and this was in St. Paul and Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. So local politics is where I started first with, Coney 2012. I was like, oh my God, I come from a country where there are child soldiers. Let's find this dude. I was hashtagging. I bought the shirt.
Wow.
I was very involved in trying to, it never happened, which, we want to talk about that later. Hashtag activism, which is not real activism.
Right.
And so I was involved in that. Then I became involved in Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. Was, door knocking, making phone calls, with my dad, getting my family involved. And when I went to college, I kind of, was trying to find my way. I spent some time in Jefferson City, Missouri, during my high school days. And so when, Mike Brown happened, that really hit me really hard. And so and I have a little brother who, that could have been him, and so I was very much involved in Black Lives Matter at the University of Minnesota. We held a lot of marches. I joined several protests when Philando Castile was, got shot. I was down there as well. It's finding your why. To be involved in advocacy, you really have to find your why. What is the reason why? For me, with the Mike Brown, I have a little brother. That was my tie into, I want to make sure this doesn't happen to another family, because that family could be me. Everybody kind of has to find their why when it comes to immigration reform. So after college, so I was involved in a lot of, Black Lives Matter. I got involved in Senator Al Franken's re-election campaign in 2014. I was his African-American recruitment intern. And became very involved in the political realms of the Minnesota Democratic Party. When I graduated, started working for Hillary for America. And so I was one of her regional organizers in the state of Minnesota, getting the community around to, whether it's having events with surrogates, hosting phone banks, hosting events. I was going 24/7 trying to, get the first female president elected. And during that time, I got really sad. I got really sad because a lot of the work that I was doing when I was trying to, push for the work to be done in my community, there wasn't, enough funding, quote unquote, to be able to do the work in my community, getting the Liberian community, which Minnesota has one of the largest Liberian communities within the U.S. And so just in the Midwest alone, there's I think up to 100,000 Liberians. That's a lot of people.
Oh my goodness.
There's a lot of us here. And so just getting that, the spirit in my community, I wasn't finding that. And so I left the campaign and I was like, you know what? I need a job.
So that was a volunteer.
No, I quit my job.
Okay.
And I just didn't know what to do. And I was just like, you know what? One day I was browsing on Facebook, out of everywhere, right? Facebook. And I saw the posting for educational organizer for a nonprofit called African Immigrant Services. And I loved the mission statement, which was those most impacted by these disparities should be the ones leading the change. And that for me was something that touched me really, closely. Like, our communities need a voice at this table. And so I applied, went through a rigorous interview process, but got hired as an educational organizer, started working with my community. I started having one-to-ones, getting to know community leaders. One of the problems of us who want to do development work as well as advocacy work, they're very similar, but you cannot go in already with your preconceived notions that you already know what the problem is. Even if you feel like you're educated enough to know, actually asking the community and kind of getting a pulse before making any decisions, especially if you're new into that space within that community. And so I had to take a step back and get to know community leaders, organizations, go to events, get to know people personally, build relationships. And then from there, I took off. We worked on the first ever racial equity policy within the Osseo School District. From there, we worked on this first ever community written health and wellness policy in the school district, where they're serving community specific foods. So if there's a Liberian population, serving foods that reflect our communities. And so it was a really great project. Then I started doing some racial equity work. And that got me really involved in that. From there, my boss was really working. He'd been working since the early 2000s on Deferred Enforced Departure, which is the DED status for Liberians. And so when he saw my passion in the education realm, and some of the groundbreaking work we're doing in the state of Minnesota, we were getting press coverage and stuff about it. He's like, you know what, let's switch this passion to immigration. What can you really do for immigration reform? And because I had already had the connections when I worked for Senator Al Franken, when it came down to, lobbying or connecting with senators and stuff from the state, I already had that connection. So it was really great to help push my connections up there and have the community leaders sit at the table. And then from there, we went national to get the extension for the last 2 years. And people didn't think we would do it, but when you have your community who, really backs you, and you have this very strong passion to want to do great, things just evolve as they go. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That sounds like such an amazing experience that you've had. And I can tell that you're super passionate, which is super inspiring, because I feel like a lot of, well, maybe I'm like speaking about myself, but I feel like we get very comfortable and complacent, and we see like issues that are happening, but then we're like, oh, well, okay, maybe someone else is going to take care of that,
Yeah.
So to see you be that person and be like, no, like, this is something I care about, and I have, the means and the connections and the access to actually like make an impact. I feel like that's like super inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. And then so with the extension for the DED status, when does that, it was extended until when?
So extended until next year. He wants it to be extended until after the elections. That's his issue right now. President Trump is what I'm referring to. So what we're doing is right now there's 2 bills circulating, in the House to be able to, the one in the House passed, one of them in the House passed. Now the Senate is looking at it, which grants Liberians. So for your listeners, the Deferred Enforced Departure is a temporary status that were given to Liberians in the late 80s, early 90s, and a little bit in the 2000s during the civil wars that took place. We had multiple, and as well as temporary status, or TPS, when the war happened, as well as when Ebola happened in West Africa in 2014. So this status, the Deferred Enforced Departure, the issue with that is it's a temporary status that any president can just declare a group of nationals protected until either a natural disaster or a health crisis or something, until it's over. But with Liberia, because there was instability for decades, this status just kept on getting extended and extended. But there was no new status that was created to give these people a permanent status. So some of these people have been here for 20 plus years on this status, and all of a sudden, because we want to reform the immigration system, we're just going to tell these people it's time to go back. That's not how it works, especially when people have businesses, they have their kids here. This thing has been extended, and Liberia is not stable enough at this moment for you to be able to just dump a group of nationals back who basically are American citizens. They pay taxes and all these different things. They contribute to the economy. But the only thing is they don't have a permanent status.
Wow. Oh my God. So, do you know, so is there a path to like permanent residency or anything like that? Or is that something that you're working on?
That's what the bill brings. So the current bill will create a pathway to citizenship or permanent residency. There's other ways to get off the program, like if you get political asylum or other things, or if you have a kid who was born in America, they turn 21, which is 21 years you'll be waiting, basically, 18 years you'll be waiting for that. And so it's like, it's very hard to get off the program. And so that's why we're trying to create this pathway. But that's some of the work that I was doing over the last 2 years within the Liberian community.
Wow, that's so amazing. And I'm sure the community is super thankful for advocates like you, like really like fighting that fight.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And so I wanted to get into the Take Back Africa Summit. Sorry. And I just wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So is this something that you created like as an individual or like as a part of a group?
Well, this is my organization. I'm the founder and CEO. So I came up with the idea, but I have a group. I have a board that works with me. So how this idea came about was I've been very involved in a lot of Pan-African work, Black liberation work, things like that, and basically community empowerment, or my organizing work that we just talked about. One of the things that I've noticed across the board is the power of the millennial generation in order to accelerate or development, whether it's within communities, within corporations, within cities, states, countries. And so the African millennial, and so I'm a scholar of political science and international affairs, and studying, my focus is conflict resolution in Africa. And so studying Africa and studying the continent is very young. The millennial generation makes up over 30% of the continent. And so that generation is really the key for, if we want to say that Africa is going to be able to change. The connection that us who are here, who are millennials, have to the continent is that, like I said, you and I came here when we were in elementary school. A lot of us, we saw the early stages of what it means to live on the continent, right? The ups, the downs, the struggles. Mm-hmm. And we've heard stories from our parents and, people that we have ties with back home. When we come here, we see the positives and negatives of what it means to live in American society and what American society could be, with that African, spark of like community. America is very individualized. And so that idea of what it means to nurture and grow a community, that strength that Africans have, is something that's really beautiful to our continent. And so how can we here basically help accelerate development on the continent? And so the summit is a meeting of minds, of Africa's next, generation minds. I have friends who started their own real estate development company on the continent. I have friends who started their own agriculture business where they have local farm women farming their products, and then they're selling them on the market for American consumers and other consumers to buy. I have friends who are involved in the political realm. And so all of these people who are really the change agents, who are trying to make that change, and us who are here, who are also trying to be involved in that change, how can we really connect together and then have the most impact? And so it's 2 days. It's in September this year. Last year, the first one was in June, but we want to have it in September, September 27th to 28th. It will be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It'll be great. Last year was the first one. And so what we had a lot of sponsors. We had Kenyan women in Minnesota. We had the Minnesota United, the soccer team of Minnesota. We had the U.S. State Department. We had the University of Minnesota and other sponsors who really helped secure our vision, and just getting the idea out there. This year is really focused on impact. And so we're only having those present who actually have their own companies or are doing really great work on the continent. And then how can we help invest or help them to be able to accelerate that change?
Wow. That sounds like a phenomenal summit. So it's open to anyone, or are you trying to stick to like mostly millennials?
It's open. We're trying to really stick to millennials just because, but it's open to everyone. Last year we had some families. We had a mom who had a millennial, but she was doing some work in African development anyways. And so it was great to hear her mindset. We're never going to turn away anybody that is interested in the conversation, but we want the majority of attendees to be millennials so that we can all kind of encourage and spark each other. Because last year, a lot of people built relationships where they're now like starting their own companies together and things like that. And it's all because of that friendship and like the meeting of the minds that happened at the summit.
Wow. And is it usually, I guess last year was the first year, but like who all attended? Like people from all over the continent?
We had, I think, anywhere from, let's see, I think we had over 16 African countries present.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like not just so we didn't have anybody that I know specifically that flew from the continent, but people who were born on the continent,
right,
who are here. And so we have people fly in from New York, people from Missouri, from Texas, drive in from North Dakota, from other areas. And then we had attendees from all over, East, West, North, South. And it was just great to see that power in the room. Just to talk about all things great that means to be Africa. And so we then extended the summit. So in March, we had a mixer. We called it the African Millennial Social. And so it was like just hashing out ideas that we have for the continent, but then also giving a charge to people. What is your role Like, what do you want to play in this puzzle? Do you want to be, are you the innovator? Are you the one who's going to be the hands-on on the ground doing the work? Or are you going to be the one who's supporting through donations? Like, what level of impact do you want to have?
Wow.
And so it was a really great conversation. We sold out in 2 days. We had 60 tickets and we
Holy
sold out.
cow.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was like, oh my God, you guys, we have to, we only had space for like 20 people, right? And so I had to go find a new venue. It was crazy, but it was just great to see that passion, and people are really excited. And so we're hoping to have that same spark at the summit this year.
Oh my goodness. That just sounds like a space I'd love to be in. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and we have a significant amount of African immigrants and refugees and things living here, and our community is fairly engaged, but there's not really like something specific to like that millennial demographic. So that's super cool to hear about. And so if people want to attend the Take Back Africa Summit, what should they do? Visit the website or?
Yeah, I mean, easy way. You can search us on Eventbrite, Take Back Africa Summit 2019. You'll see it. But if you just want to go to the website, www.takebackafricasummit.org, on the headers, you'll see 2019. You'll see summit registration. And so you can click on summit registration. It'll take you straight to that page. If you want to find out more information about the summit, right now we are finalizing our speakers and presenters. We already have narrowed it down to everybody, but we want to basically share out their information and stuff like that so people can get excited ahead of time. And so we'll be releasing that in early August. And so, but we're really excited for the possibilities of what's going to happen. Right now, we're working on some big sponsorships. Hopefully they come through, and that will just solidify the work that we're trying to do.
Wow. That's so cool. So I wish you all the best with that, and I hope it's gonna sell out. I just wanted to end on a question about what about Africa's future inspires you right now?
Oh my God, that's an amazing question. Man, we are I don't even, when you're so passionate about something that it's like internally raging just for you to talk about it. That's how I feel when I talk about the African continent. Wow. I'm literally in the room with people who are going to be the U.S. next Secretary of State, who's probably going to run the Pentagon, somebody who's going to run the World Bank. These are people that I'm at one of the most prestigious schools in the United States, in the world, the Elliott School of International Affairs. And I'm talking about all things Africa and where Africa needs to be. And regardless of the conversation that people feel like, whether it's negative or positive, we always say that Africa has a bright future if Africa capitalizes on it. That's the thing. We have such a young generation. We have the youngest generation by 2050, but we're going to have the world's youngest workforce with really, we don't know how to deal with that. And so how do we capitalize on the bright future where there's our natural resources that we have, development? We're moving into the next frontier. You're seeing technology change the world. You're seeing innovation change the world. Africa is very innovative. And this is the time now for Africa to really specialize as a continent. I'm not saying it to be like how white people do it. Like, as a continent, we are not on the same page. Right. And that's the issue that we're having. And so you have, for example, the Continental Free Trade Agreement that was just signed by most of our African nations to basically now create free trade between us. Do you know that we've been free, most of us, Liberia, since 172 years ago, and the most recent, probably 20 years ago, Eritrea? We have not been trading next to each other, and we're on the same continent. It's what wild. Does that? It's the wildest thing to me. And so how do we capitalize on this, the amazing opportunity right now? Everybody wants to invest on the continent. That's why people are fighting for our resources. That's why China, that's why the US. But if we are not securing ourselves and making sure, I work for the Ghanaian embassy. I'll end with this. The ambassador IJ Bafwa, one of the things that he said was, because he's been around for a long time, he's like, Africa right now, if we do not band together, the diaspora and the continent, there's going to be another battle for Africa. And this time they're going to eliminate us. And when he said that, he's like the mental capacity, the human workforce that we have to do great things, we're not applying it. And he's like, we're still arguing over basic necessities for roads and things like that. And look at where these people are arguing over policies for infrastructure and things. He's like, that's the level of high thinking that we're supposed to be at. But there's so many internal conflicts that are trumping any other way for development. But I honestly believe that Africa has a bright future. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without it. I'm literally going to get my master's just so I can go back to do great things on the continent. That's literally all I want to do with my life. And I want people to, even if you're not going to go back home, quote unquote, at least support the work that is being done to create that change. So many times, like you said, we get so relaxed and so latent and so comfortable in what it means to be here. But remember, there's only one place that's home. There's only one place that you can actually go and feel like you belong. And that will always be where you come from. And so for me, that I feel like is my charge. I can't sit here and just let things go by without being that person to create some type of change. So support us, the crazy ones that, do the crazy work. But yes. I'm excited. I'm excited for our continent, man.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
What you said about the ambassador, like, literally gave me chills. That is, it's just so wild to think about, but it's super realistic. If we don't, get out of our own way and really take our like development and growth seriously. So thank you so much for this super educational conversation.
No problem at all.
I've learned so much just in these like short 30 minutes. And I'm so excited to share this with the listeners, and hopefully this encourages them to also, take action and do a little bit more. So yeah, thank you, Fata, for being a guest on Dear Diaspora. I super appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
I absolutely loved that conversation with Fata. She's such a great example of what it really looks like to show up for your community and be an advocate. I learned so much, and I hope you did too. If you want to learn more about the Take Back Africa Summit happening September 27th and 28th in Minnesota, please visit takebackafricasummit.org. And you can also subscribe to Fata's podcast, Diaspora Talks, on iTunes. Thanks for listening to Dear Diaspora. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. You can find us on Instagram at Dear Diaspora or visit our website at deardiasporashow.com. Thank you, and talk to you next week.